Hello and welcome to the Mighty's Facebook Live pages. We have got so many pages that I'm going to have you, John, help me read these pages. Okay.
There's too many pages.
Take a big breath. Here we go. We've got chronic illness, chronic pain, chronic warrior, chronic fatigue. I'm fatigued.
I got it. I'm going to take over from here. We have the cancer page. We have the mental health page. We have PTSD. Boy, do I ever. Every day is a mental health day.
Say that again.
Say that again. And we must be doing something right because we're on their flagship page, the Mighty site.
Woo, that's mighty.
Mighty is right. So welcome to our show. It's called the it's called the trauma illness paradigm. Thank you.
The trauma illness paradigm.
It'd be nice to know the title of the show.
You should
know
that.
The trauma illness paradigm, and we're so glad that you can join us.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Yay! Hello, everyone who's saying hello.
Trisha's joining us.
So my name is Cynthia Toussaint, and I will be your co-host for this. We're going to try to keep it to 45-minute segment of the trauma illness paradigm. And I'm also the founder and spokesperson at the nonprofit For Grace, where we help women with high impact, persistent pain.
Yeah.
So I notice you're hanging around. Who are you?
I guess I am. I'm here for some reason. I'll tell you who I am. I'm John Garrett, and I am the director at For Grace. And I am also the co-host of this wonderful show. Again,
what's it called?
The show is called the Trauma Illness Paradigm. I got it right that time. And I think we're doing, a really important topic here. We feel we're doing a really critical topic, which is we are exploring how trauma can lead to toxic stress, which puts people at higher risk for developing chronic illnesses,
it sure does.
Such as cancer, such as chronic pain, such as heart disease, such as diabetes,
stroke, mental illness, really everything. And the reason,
virtually everything.
This is what Lady Gaga is talking about right now.
Right. Lady Gaga on the Oprah interview this week, she talked about how her PTSD led to her neuropathic pain. So
I'm so glad she's speaking out. And the reason that John and I are so fascinated by the link between trauma and illness is personal. We both experienced a great deal of trauma, and I've had way more than my share of illness, and that includes more than 38 years of high impact pain. And last year, I became a survivor of triple negative breast cancer. It was a rough one. So where do you fit into all of this?
Well, I think I fit nicely into it because I've been your caregiver for 38 years. So I've been next to you just like I am right now.
Yes. So we've got a lot of skin in the trauma illness game, right?
And we got so much skin in it. I think I could use a moisturizer.
No, you had to do that before the show.
All right. So there you go.
Okay. So now before you introduce our wonderful guest today.
Oh my gosh. Do we have a wonderful guest today?
Yes. I just want to do a quick shout out, I should say, I'm going on 5 hours of sleep. I guess there's an eclipse. But I want to do a shout out
I'll do it.
To all the women and men, I know you're out there watching the show, that we love the Mighty for so many reasons. You are the number one reason. My mother taught me not to point. I apologize for that. So we want this show to be interactive. You are forever insightful and bright and inquisitive, sharp. And please be bold. And when you send in your great comments and questions, I see we're getting them already. We look forward to taking those throughout the show.
Be bold. Be bold, and mighty forces will come to your aid.
That is so good. It's like a classic. I feel like I've never heard it before.
It's a stroke of genius. Just came up with that myself.
Okay. So our guest
is Diana Whitney.
Diana Whitney.
I think there's an echo in this room. Anyway, the wonderful Diana Whitney is our guest, and let me tell you a bit about our guest, Diana Whitney. So she writes across the genres in Vermont, beautiful Vermont, with a focus on motherhood, sexuality, and feminism. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Glamour magazine.
I've heard of these places.
None of these are slouches, long reads, and many more. So in 2003. She was diagnosed with a chronic pelvic pain condition and began a long journey of healing, which continues today through her writing and activism.
Woo!
Her memoir, In Progress, explores mothers and daughters, trauma, and generational patterns of female silence. As a survivor of sexual violence, Diana advocates for other survivors and the empowerment of girls and women. She lives with her husband and their 2 strong-willed teen daughters who inspire them every day. I'm sure of that.
You do.
I'm sure of that.
So Diana Whitney's brand new book,
There it is.
You're seeing it here. You don't have to be everything.
It
Poems
is.
for girls becoming themselves.
Beautiful book.
This book is getting rave reviews from just about everywhere. It's selling off the shelves.
It is a beautiful book.
Go to Amazon, your local bookstore today, and buy this book.
Or
Please
borrow it. Or maybe
Or
steal
borrow.
it.
We cannot
Okay.
condone
No, no.
stealing on the mighty.
No, just borrow it and don't give it back.
Borrow this
That's all
book.
I said.
I am not a teenager. At age 60, I just read this book. I just finished it. And I relived my teenage years and I sort of made sense of them. And I read them to you. I read most of the book to you.
It was an eye-opening experience.
So read this to your partner, and I'm then going to give it to a really important young woman in my life. So please give it away. It's such a gift. This book is, the artwork is extraordinary. Every page.
I mean it. Every page is just a beautiful piece of art, honestly.
Yes.
Honestly.
Every page is a gift. And I love how Diana breaks up the book into 8 different parts, including seeking, loneliness, attitude, rage. Remember rage? I enjoyed reading that to you.
Yeah, I do.
Longing, shame, sadness. And we just did belonging. And I read that. And then I immediately went to you and I read it to you. And it made me cry. So all of this being said, welcome, Diana Whitney, to the Trauma Illness Paradigm. Hi, Diana.
Hi.
So nice to see you.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you, John and Cynthia. What a great welcome. And it's just so fun to be here on the show. And I love that you held up the book.
I'll do it again.
Well, we
before
have
the
our own
show's
personal
over.
copy here. We just, bring it out. Just ride it around a little bit. Yeah.
So we're kind of jealous because you're in Vermont, but we're from California. We'll come to Vermont someday. You'll come to California. We'll meet. We'll meet up. We're going to do
Vermont.
that.
It is. I mean, now's the time to be jealous, but you wouldn't have been jealous this winter.
That's true, but it's romantic in winter. Yeah. We've been there then. So we met Diana by phone. I think it was late last year. Yeah. And we were kind of doing narrative therapy. We're going to talk about narrative therapy today, among a lot of other things. And I thought it was really cool how you were we were writing my story together, but you really wrote it. And when I read it, I saw my whole life really experienced differently from a different perspective. And it helped me understand and clarify my life. And so for me, narrative therapy, I now realize goes both ways. And how does that work, that reading helped me?
I mean, I'm so honored that you said that, because for me to get to interview you and hear your story and your journey with pain, like you said, 38 years, and then to put that into words, I mean, using your own words, but to form it through, my own prose and share it with an audience, it's always really powerful. It's emotional. And I always hope that, I was sharing women's stories, health stories and journeys. And I was so happy to hear that it resonated with you and that there was like a reflection. And I think that is something about writing and reading, that we see ourselves, whether it's reading the story of someone else's journey with a health challenge, or maybe being able to write our own and share it.
That's so cool. And yes, and I loved how when we brought this up just before the live, but I remember when we were interviewing and I told you about the trauma in my life, and I said something like, well, you probably haven't heard about this. And I really thought you wouldn't have. And you said, well, actually, I just wrote a book about it. And I've just felt such a deep connection with you ever since. And I've enjoyed our emails, really, again, narrative therapy, and getting to know you. And it's such a pleasure to be able to interview you today. And I wanted to start off before talking more about narrative therapy, because so many people watching this show, including myself, are dealing with chronic pain. Can you tell us about your journey with pelvic pain?
Yeah, it began during my Saturn returns when I was 29 years old. I didn't exactly know at the time that is kind of a potent time for challenges in a young person's life. But it kind of started out of the blue. And I eventually was diagnosed with a condition called interstitial cystitis. But it took almost a year to get an accurate medical diagnosis from caring providers that allowed me to move forward on a journey of healing. And I would say that year was one of the most agonizing experiences, both physically and psychically, emotionally, that I've ever had, to be in sometimes excruciating pain. And then the cycle of pain, anxiety, fear, pain, it becomes a feedback loop. So for people who don't know, interstitial cystitis is like a chronic inflammation of the bladder. It feels like having a UTI, sometimes a really bad UTI that just has no treatment. It doesn't go away, doesn't resolve with antibiotics. And I will say, it's hard for me actually to go back and try to relive the chronology of that time.
Diana, don't do that then. If it's gonna, no, really, if it's that hard, there's no reason to go back. I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to move forward.
Let's move forward. I mean, I think what might be important is that I think part of the delay in diagnosis was there was really misogyny in the medical system, being disbelieved by the doctors, basically male urologists who told me, oh, it was all in my head. Or I heard one say like, oh, this bladder thing, it's something that perfectionist, privileged white women have, so kind of get over yourself. So very dismissive, not acknowledging that it was a real condition. And so that kind of discounting, as opposed to being heard, to being listened to being acknowledged, to being told, yes, this is real and it's not your fault. Because that was also, I don't know if I think this might be similar to other people who struggle with pain. It's like, what did I do? And then the frantic, what can I do to get out of this? And I just couldn't relax even. Or even if I would have times where, a flare-up would die down, it was always in the back of my head, when's it going to start again? What could trigger it? I was very afraid it was things that I was eating. It ended up, for me, not being connected at all to diet. It was much more connected to, frankly, to trauma and to, a history of depression and anxiety. But it took me a long, long time to figure that out. And when I did get my diagnosis, it was actually by I went to this wonderful place in Philadelphia called the Pelvic Floor Institute. It's has a different name now, but it was all women. And they listened to me. They took me seriously. They said, yes, you have this, but we're going to help you. There's treatment. They gave me hope after a year of real suffering and anguish. And, something shifted for me. It's not like all of a sudden, like, oh, I started to, get better. But being heard, being valued, that was an absolute turning point.
Yeah, I got really angry when you were speaking because I was told I was crazy for the first 13 and a half years, complex regional pain syndrome. I mean, I just actually did a CD and I called it Crazy, dedicated it to women in pain who know they're not. They tell us all that we're crazy. And then there's the feeling I felt ashamed. And I remember I was in a wheelchair and I had you wheel me out of doctor's offices because I was so ashamed that they thought I was making this up because it didn't make any sense. And when you're validated, I mean, when I was finally diagnosed, I really got the worst diagnosis. It's like an icy diagnosis. And yet I was so free and I was finally able to get better. And I started getting better really fast. I got out of bed after 10 years, after I got diagnosed, and because I got heard and they finally couldn't say I was crazy anymore. So there's just something so healing about that. And we have a lot of people coming in. I feel like I'm going to take all the time, but let's take some of the questions in a little bit.
Sure.
So you believe that trauma? Do you believe? I don't want to put the words in your mouth. Do you believe that trauma is the cause of your pain?
I mean, I think it's complex. I think the inner work that I think at that time of, being in my late 20s and then getting the diagnosis and embarking on a healing journey, I didn't really look deeply then into inherited family trauma, into the trauma my mother had been through. And, it took years. And so I guess I want to encourage to everybody out there who's struggling with either chronic pain or another kind of chronic illness. And let me say, I also, I deal with chronic depression, and I have since I was 13, which is one of the reasons I wanted to write that book for teen girls, because being a teen girl was like the hardest time of my life, maybe other than the year before finding out I had IC. So so what happened was I got my IC to a place of sort of remission. Then I had 2 babies, and actually both of those childbirths were really traumatic. Actually, I almost died from preeclampsia. I went blind in labor, which is unusual. And I believe, that it's not a coincidence. All these things were happening in my pelvic region. It's all second chakra stuff. I'm a very healthy person. I was an elite cross-country ski racer and a rower. Like, I have a strong, healthy body, but if there's a place where there's weakness or holding or vulnerability in my body, it's that pelvic region. And so everything that's kind of gone wrong for me, or any cry for help from my body, it's been there. And so it was after having these babies, having these 2 emergency C-sections that were really scary. I didn't think IC was going to come back, and it came back worse than ever in 2013. And I will say what came back with it was a suicidal depression at the pain. And anyone who's lived with chronic pain, and I know you know this, Cynthia, there were times I felt like if there's no relief from this, I can't go on. And especially as a mother with 2 young kids, that was just such a hard place to be. I was so lucky that my husband was just by my side the whole time, telling me I could get better. And I can see that John is there for you. And luckily I had really good care. I actually went back to the same provider who would help me 10 years before. And that for me was when I started, in that kind of crisis, in the time following the 2013 to starting to write a book about my family's trauma. That's when I think I started to do the hard healing work. To look into what's going on in my body. I started seeing, and I feel very lucky that I have been able to afford to see, an acupuncturist,
Yes.
spiritual healer. I went to this woman who is like a channeler, and, she went into a trance, and she told me things like, there is no sickness in your body. You're holding your mother's story. And that was really profound to be told that, because I was always so baffled, like, what is going on? And kind of like what you're holding is not your own, that there had been like this weight that I was carrying, like literally in my pelvis. And I even had someone talk about, past lives and injury that had happened in past lives. But really what resonated for me was hearing that it was kind of like through the maternal line. So where I went was, and at the same time that I was dealing with this IC flare, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So I was starting to uncover secrets and silence in my family of origin, and she was being silenced by a disease. And I was aware of that. And I started writing and researching what had happened to her before I was born. And that is really where I believe the healing work came.
Wow. So I relate with a lot of so much of that. Can you tell me, is inherited trauma the same as generational trauma?
I think so. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not a scientist, so I kind of think that those 2 phrases, I would use them interchangeably. I guess you can think about generational patterns, but I really believe that, doing the research, reading, there's a guy, Mark Wolin, who wrote It Didn't Start With You. And I discovered his work, and it's how inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how we can break the cycle. And he's the one who says, the firstborn daughter often carries what is unresolved in the mother. And I heard that, man, and it was like he was speaking right to me. I'm the firstborn daughter. My mother was almost murdered when she was 20. And in college, and it was a terrifying experience that was essentially silenced. She didn't report it. It was 1966, and it wasn't talked about in her family. It wasn't talked about in my family when she became a mom. And what I realized is that it's actually a really crazy story. The man who was her boyfriend, who almost he attacked her with a broken bottle and almost choked her to death in Philadelphia in 1966, where she was at Penn. He stopped for some reason. He did not go all the way. He left her. He went on to murder a later girlfriend. He was a misogynist sociopath. He was violent. He was also a guru. You can Google him. His name is Ira Einhorn. He was a 60s guru. He hobnobbed with, all the famous people of the 60s. And after he was arrested for murder of his girlfriend, the one who came after my mom, he was someone posted bail. He had all these, rich connections, very, very, kind of wealthy acolytes who did think he was brilliant. He fled to Europe for 20 years on the lam. And when they finally found him and brought him back for trial, they called my mom and they asked her to come and testify. And that was when my own illness began. That's when my IC began. I only realized this much later.
Right. It takes us, go ahead, John.
No, go ahead.
Well, it takes us so long to put it all together.
Yeah.
I mean, I, as I was getting ready to interview, we were getting ready to interview you, I realized that, oh my gosh, well, I know I got ill when I was 21, and I realized my mom got married to my very violent, I loved my father, but very violent man who was attacking her regularly, physically, sexually, verbally. And I watched that. And she was 21. And okay, so that was later, obviously, when I was born, but she got married when she was 21, and I got sick when I was 21, and she started getting she had been abused all while growing up, but she really got abused a lot worse when she was 21. And I don't think that's a coincidence anymore. And even when I was 20, I kept saying to John, I've only got a year. I've only got to like 21.
That's right.
It was, and it was like, why? And I just felt so sure. And even my Aunt Grace, who I feel such a close connection with, and yet I never met her. She was 21 when after she really saved my mom, she was so abused, and there was so much generational trauma, and she was abandoned by her mother completely. And her father was put into a mental institution just to be cruel. The family was being cruel. And she was 21 when she died from leukemia. And my mom always said she died from a broken heart. And now I realize, no, Grace died from trauma. She broke the cycle. And I'm always compared with her. And I've broken the cycle in my family. But it takes so much time. And my mom, to put it all together, and my mom now has advanced Alzheimer's too. And my family kind of uses her as unless you come back, you can't see her. Come back into the dysfunction. It's so dysfunctional.
So the trauma just kind of rolls on because, like Tamara mentions, both my parents had trauma, and I'm the first female. So I guess. And
everybody's saying I'm the firstborn daughter. I've been noticing these comments, and I find that really fascinating. Both my parents had trauma. I'm the first female. Yeah. Really, really interesting. Right. So now, I'm wondering, why did you start having depression at such a young age? Do you know?
I mean, there's depression on both sides of my family, both the maternal and not my dad, but his sister and his mother. I learned, even though no one really spoke of it, the research I started to do showed that it was there. But, I knew my mom had always struggled with depression and anxiety. And felt shame about that too. So I think when I was 13, I also had a trauma then, because I had a a relationship with another girl that was, I mean, it was manipulative. It was, in some ways very super intense and like intertwined, but it was also, it was scary. I was isolated and alone. We were both cutting. It was, kind of that perfect storm that was happening. I was also like the awakening of my sexuality. I'm bisexual. It was the 80s. I wasn't able to even like think about what identity I was. My parents, when they found out I was with this, that my best friend was like my girlfriend, they cut her off. They forbid me to see her. And that, they had the best intentions. I believe that. I think they were trying to protect me. But that kind of silencing, I carried a lot of shame then. And, and I think about, the pelvis and holding shame there, hiding the truth of my sexuality. So that was kind of where depression began. And then it kind of cycled for me. Like, it wasn't like I was just in my room, unable to function. I was really high functioning. I was valedictorian of my high school. I was a 3-sport varsity athlete, but under the surface, I was hiding who I was. I didn't find like really close friends until right at the end of high school. And then when I was 18, and this is interesting, Cynthia, when you talked about your mom and the 21. So my mom, the Ira Einhorn, the brutal attack happened like I think she was either 19 or 20 when I was 18. And that happened at an Ivy League institution at Penn. I went to Dartmouth and I was raped in a dorm room when I was 18. So the similarities between like being violated by a man in a, privileged elite institution that is supposed to be, the end all be all of like what we're supposed to achieve. And as young women, that there was some cycles that I was repeating. And certainly when I gave birth to 2 daughters and I started doing this work on inherited trauma, I just thought, God, I have to break the cycle because I don't want this to happen to my girls when they go to college. And how can I break the cycle? Right.
And that's so exciting. And it really is about breaking the cycle. And it can happen. And so many family members just keep it going. And we watch that, and it's such a sad thing. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm glad that you're doing the work that you're doing and you're making something so ugly into something so beautiful. And I just want to mention to everybody with chronic pain, we're all perfectionists, and we do feel that we do have to do everything, and we carry the weight, of the world on our shoulders. And I've been learning much about CRPS in my EMDR work, and we become experts at being perfectionists, and we want to fix everything, and we work to fix everything, and we're the functional ones, and it's just really hard. And I think it's so important to tell everybody that we don't have to be the fixer. John and I both were the fixers in our families. True. And but it takes such a toll on our bodies, and we're all the AAA personalities, and I think we're all successful. And I don't know that we're even really liked in the family once we get sick, or, hey, you have to, I don't know. It's just, we're the truth tellers. I also am the firstborn, and I'm just relating so much with your story. And I do want to talk, because we're talking about really, really sad things. And I want everybody to know that there is hope. And I mentioned doing EMDR for trauma release. It's really, really effective. And talk therapy. I know of cognitive behavioral therapy, myofascial release we were talking about with our last Mighty live stream. And I know that that Diana, you're doing something called embodied counseling. Can you tell me about that and how it works? To give people hope that the true hope that's out there.
Actually, I mean, before even getting to embodied counseling, I've had wonderful experiences with EMDR. I was able to really clear the trauma. I talked about having 2 emergency childbirths, that I couldn't even speak about without going into a PTSD state. EMDR was amazing. It's it worked so well for me. And I did it with a sexual assault too. So like, that's why I can write about what happened. I've integrated it. I've actually become an activist where I support other survivors of sexual violence. And it feels like that's what I'm meant to do, is to be the truth teller and the silence breaker. But it's having had that, like, the opportunity to work with providers and who were there alongside me. So EMDR,
Yes.
for sure, just, some classical, like, good old talk therapy. But I kind of ran its course for me. Like, so there's only
Me
so
too.
many times you can just tell the same story.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. That's what happened to me too. And I'm just like, but I'm not getting better, but I'm not getting, and finally I'm doing EMDR, and the trauma release is so amazing. It's painful. I feel like I'm doing it on Zoom. And I feel like when I really get there, I mean, I'm sobbing and I'm wanting to look away. It feels like my face is going to explode. But I've learned that when you release the trauma, it's just as painful as taking it in. But once you release it, it's gone. Had to put that in.
It's amazing. And I mean, I know doesn't work for everyone. So I encourage all the people who are listening, to try to, find a trauma trained provider. And there are sort of other avenues too. But EMDR is incredible. And I feel like doing that work and clearing it allowed me to come to a place of, like, standing and grounding. And let me say, before I get to the embody part, like, I'm going to knock on wood when I say this, but I'm not in pain right now. And I haven't been for many years. I know I still have interstitial cystitis, and I always will. And I need to really take care of myself. I need to, really manage my mental health. I do still very much struggle with the chronic depression, that mood disorder, and I have different things that I do for that. But it's been, maybe 5 or 6 years without IC flare up. And that I believe is due to doing the work around inherited trauma, around the family lineage, and not only the EMDR, but I now have this therapist who I work with every week. And the embodied counseling is like, it's a combination of, the presence of a professional who also, we just sit and do meditations. I talk a lot. I'm a Gemini. I'm always up in my head. I'm very, like, air sign. She grounds
me too.
grounds me. I kind of breathe down into my pelvis. I mean, it's stuff where if you're not into this, you're like, oh, it's woo-woo, but it works, It
works. That's the thing. You can't argue it. It works. You can't argue that.
No, and
yes.
Yeah,
it really does. And there's opportunities within that counseling for me to imagine, to meditate, to visualize my ancestors who were harmed, who did go through trauma, to even see it.
Very interesting.
It is. And it's not like,
done that.
very cool.
No, and it is sort of like, you're like, what? But if you have somebody who can kind of guide you into that, even so, my mom now is advanced Alzheimer's. She's nonverbal. She doesn't recognize me. I don't have an opportunity to talk. I mean, I can talk to her now, but we don't have a conversation. But I can have a conversation with her in a meditative state and feel like I'm clearing some of this.
Well, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And I love talking to ancestors. I talk to my inner child a lot. I'm there right now. But that's exciting.
Very
makes
cool.
A lot of sense to me.
Diane is saying all these acronyms. Please help. So what EMDR is?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
And I think also CBT.
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
There you go.
They're all therapies for releasing trauma.
Right.
And there was another question that I wanted to take, but there's so many people were saying that a lot of people are saying that EMDR really helps them. So that was really great to hear. But yay.
Great.
Okay. So, yes, we have said it, Kay says. We have said it all.
Yeah.
I've lost Kay. Oh, yes, we have said it all. She's going back and forth. So what I want to ask you, Diana, is, or you're not going back and forth, Kay. So need new ways to do therapy. DBH has helped me. MFR, oh my goodness, helped so much that I went to the certification courses. Okay, those are some more acronyms
DBH.
for us.
We want to look into that one.
Yeah, should we describe EMDR?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it. And actually, is MFR the myofascial release? Yeah, so
very good.
Thank you.
I did that too. I mean, during when I was like in chronic pelvic pain, I would go to like a pelvic floor PT and like, you know, that was so scary to have somebody like working on the area that was in pain and just wanted to like contract and protect. But with a trained therapist doing like breathing and the myofascial release, I mean, it was really powerful. So all of these things that people are saying, I feel like I've tried them all. The EMDR, my therapist, you either hold little kind of buzzers in your hand that sort of vibrate a little, like zzz, or someone can even move their finger and you follow it with your eyes. And it's a back and forth between the two sides of the brain. And, you know, I'm a writer, not a scientist, so I can't explain the neuroscience behind it, but it's a way of reprocessing a traumatic memory, a traumatic event, while the therapist kind of has you talk through and go back to what has happened.
Exactly.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. I also do something called one eye integration where it's so cool. And on one eye, because of the, you know, each eye is representing a different part of the brain, and my emotions are really different. And we wait until it finally calms down and finally releases. And actually lately, when I've been releasing, I get really, really tired. And my practitioner, Kathy, has been saying, it's because you're releasing trauma, you're reliving trauma, releasing trauma, repressed memories from probably before you were even verbal. They were from such a long time ago.
This is amazing. Diana, I guess I know we've been touching on this off and on. Maybe we can just get back to our core theme of what we'd like to talk about today. How has, you know, maybe a little deeper dive here, how has narrative therapy helped you?
How does it help you? How does it help you heal?
You know, when you talked about, I think in my introduction, John, you talked about the book that I wrote on breaking generational patterns of female silence. And that book wasn't published. I have a literary agent. She sent it out. It didn't find a home yet. It hasn't. It maybe wasn't ready to come into this world. But I believe that the intense time I spent writing that book and researching my mother's story, the Ira Einhorn story, but also other aspects of her adolescence and her family of origin, and even my grandmother and my great-grandmother, things that I was able to learn about those women who had been a mystery to me. And what I discovered through that, I mean, it was hard. I was depressed when I was doing it. I didn't want it. In some ways, I was like, God, why am I doing this? But I was compelled. And
sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Right. And
and
I actually, so my mother was called to be a witness at this trial, which happened in, I believe, 2002, 2003. I mean, the irony, no, it was before, it was like right around that time that I got my first symptoms, right, of IC. The irony to me, when I discovered that the place that was my site of healing in Philadelphia was literally like a mile away from the courthouse where my mom went down to testify at Ira Einhorn's murder trial. And she was the key witness for the prosecution that helped to put him away for first-degree murder and put him in prison for life. He just died last year in 2020. He died in prison. My mother outlived him. She was incredibly brave. She's someone who, for a lot of her life, you know, in some ways, always kind of deferred to powerful men, often abusive men. But she, after so much silence, she went down there and she was absolutely brilliant. And what I was able to do researching my book was I found the transcript to the trial. And this is, you know, my mom doesn't speak anymore, but is able to find her time on the witness stand. And I think that moment of discovering it, like in this obscure courthouse in Philadelphia, and I had to buy it. Right. And then I got to transcribe it. And that, I mean, narrative therapy for me, to see my mother in that light, to realize what her courage, her silence breaking and standing up and seeing him in that courtroom. And, you know, then I found all the newspaper clippings after the trial talking about her. I interviewed some of the attorneys who were there about what she did. I mean, there's more to it, but I guess I felt like going into the shadow, you know, that's what I had to do.
Sure.
And it was, I haven't had a flare up since then. It's not that I have to be very careful. It could come back, but I think I know what I have to do to heal.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. And I had goosebumps because, okay. We'll let the goosebumps go for a moment. Maria says, what is the definition of narrative therapy? Do you know?
I don't know if I know. I think I was just kind of making my own definition. So maybe you can, I guess.
One of those things you don't know, but you see it, when you see it type of thing.
We tell everybody to do narrative therapy. Writing our memoir and relating with you got us to understand our lives. It was like the best couples therapy we've ever had, writing together. And I actually went into a CRPS partial remission. I was able to swim a mile after not being able to do any aerobic exercise. I mean, it seems impossible. I can sing after I couldn't even speak for 5 years.
But it was literally the action of writing the word to page, or
your feelings, just
exercising these internal thoughts and traumas and experiences onto a written piece of paper.
You know what I always advise, if you're interested in doing narrative therapy, I guess we have to look it up, but keep a pad of paper and a pencil by your bed. And as soon as you wake up, just write your stream of consciousness. And whatever you write is what you need to put on that paper. And it will bring you to a place of better wellness. Right. And it doesn't matter if you bury it or publish it or frame it.
I think you can bake it into a cake and
bake it into a cake and then burn it or frame it. Whatever you write
you want to do
will help to heal you.
And it doesn't need to be in a book form or a long format form. Like you said, just something can be very short form.
And just back to the goosebumps, my mother, your mother reminds me a bit of my mother. And she was very abused by her mother. And like Grace, and her father was put into an insane asylum. And my mother went back to face that judge. And it was back in Minnesota, and he was, an old man, and as opposed to a young man, obviously. And he literally looked down at my mom. He hadn't seen her since she was a little girl. And Grace was saying, "I'm going to get him out." And he looked at my mom and he said, "I had to do what I did, Leona." It's that sort of that same kind of strength.
Reckoning.
Yeah. And so I think that really helped her. And I can still talk to her, and she talks a lot about Grace and her father. So that's still a gift.
So
I have a question. Everybody has a question for Diana.
I'm just sitting here. No, I'm going to
go ahead.
No, I'm just kidding. Diana, again, because I think this does dovetail into what we've been talking about, because this is kind of the other side of the coin. So you've written a lot about the culture of silence, especially when it comes to female trauma. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think once I was able to get to a place like in my own health and not be kind of compromised or held back by pain and fear, that I was able to start speaking out without fear, and to be a truth teller, and then to consider myself an activist on the behalf of other women, of survivors. And I started to connect with like other young women who had also been raped at Dartmouth, and speaking out around that. So, yeah, I mean, I guess, it's not only gendered, because I also know that men and non-binary people are survivors of both trauma and sexual violence. I guess it's more like, this is where, this is kind of like my place and my story, especially as the daughter of a mother who went through it. And my mom's trauma, the almost murder, that domestic violence, it was also connected to, this kind of intense manipulative sexual relationship as well with Ira Einhorn. If anyone wants to Google him, you'll learn more about him. And also, you did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, John. Leo, it's like, they say trauma lives in the body, right?
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah, how does fear and trauma live in the body?
Yeah. So if you are a girl or a young woman, and I'm just going to be like, I guess I'm just going to talk about women right now, but I think there are, if you're a man who's experienced trauma or sexual trauma, it's going to be the same thing where you've experienced a violation, the boundary violation of being, profoundly in danger, both psychically and physically. And so that like your very essence is like destroyed and devalued in that experience. The body, it's not just like, oh, you go to a few therapy sessions and you're okay. Like the body holds on, and that's a protective mechanism. And, that's where the PTSD can come from. That's where the symptoms, recurring symptoms of depression, of anxiety, of an insomnia, of, having nightmares, of reactivity, where you get really easily re-triggered, which is something, right? So I am still aware of that. I'm so glad I have such a good therapist, because she'll say, oh, that's a trauma response. Even with like stuff that's happened in the pandemic, it's really re-traumatizing, And so being able to recognize that it's not even like in my cognitive brain, it's like deep in the limbic brain, like that primal place. And it kind of just responds. And then I think the body, like for me, for example, I talked about IC and my pelvis, like there was trauma to my own pelvic region through, sexual violence, but there was also inherited through my mother and my ancestors. And so it's natural that part of the body would like constrict in a like protective way. And so learning to breathe, to be mindful, to find ways to feel safe, to be loving towards my body, to not carry the shame and self-blame around the symptoms, which is, I think, what I was doing for a very long time, trying to break the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Diana.
Great work. And we have to remember that this is work, people. I mean, we can't just wish our trauma away. We have to do the work. And you're mentioning how brave your mother is, and you're mentioning, I think you said shame around in your pelvic area. And I'm thinking about, there's so much shame and stigma around trauma still, and which is so upsetting to me. When I write about trauma and put it out there, the pain world just kind of chews me up. They don't like it. And I feel like they're shameful, and they don't want to admit it. And there's nothing to admit. If we don't understand what happened to us, we really don't have any hope. We're not going to get better, I don't think. So this is really what this is. I don't feel like trauma is a piece of the pain or illness puzzle. I feel like it's the puzzle. Sure. And I'm so glad, Diana, that you're talking about trauma and illness, and you're writing about it. And you're doing such heroic work. Where does your courage come from?
Oh my gosh. I don't often feel courageous. I've had, people say, oh, you're so strong. I mean, that's not always how it feels from the inside. I'll tell you that. And there are some dark days. I mean, I struggle with, like I said, the recurring depression, seasonal affective disorder. I spent a lot of time this winter, like definitely not feeling courageous at all. And I do better in spring. May is my favorite month. It's my birth month. So maybe I'm feeling, the cycle's on the upswing now. And I guess, I'll be honest, being the truth teller and the silence breaker, and then seeing that validated and reflected by other people who are saying, yes, me too, to feel not alone, and to say, yeah, this is helping me. When you talk about it, when you admit that, maybe your life looks perfect on the outside, but you're paralyzed with depression, or you have this pain, that just reinforces like how healing it can be to speak the truth, even when your family of origin really doesn't want you to do it,
Yes.
Yeah, Kay.
I'm the one who says the emperor has no clothes.
Kay made the point earlier about 10, 15 minutes ago. We are the functional ones, the truth tellers, and we deal with not being
thank
liked.
You, Kay. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it kind of puts you at odds to those who want to live in the dark, right?
I come from a family of alcoholics, denial. We don't say it's true. Dad did not jump off of a bridge, you know?
Yeah.
So, and it's if you are the truth teller, thank you so much for saying that. My therapist says, you say the emperor has no clothes, and well, that's the truth. But a lot of people want to live in that dysfunction, that denial, and they will sometimes try to pull you into that, and they're not comfortable unless you sort of live in that world.
Yeah, because I think there are unwritten rules that happen in family structures and systems where, you know, and if there's been a lot of trauma, you know, part of those rules is that was in the past. This is whatever happened doesn't count. You know, in the back room.
And it does go generation. As I'm doing EMDR now, trauma release, I'm realizing my dad comes from had a very traumatic childhood. My mom did. My dad's parents. Oh my gosh, what a nightmare that was. My mother's parents. Her grandparents. And then I would love to do all this research that you, Diana, are doing to learn more about my ancestors, because this is trauma that really isn't my own, but I'm holding on to it. And I'm learning that from you, Diana.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the recognition that it's not ours, you know, especially those of us who tend towards type A perfectionism, that we think it's, you know, and that's the book. And I do want to encourage anybody, It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin. You can see my copy is like dog-eared, and I have 100 posts. I actually got to interview Mark for my book and actually talk to him about my situation, but being given permission to know that some of these patterns, that some of this pain began long before you were born, and you don't have to carry it anymore. And that was one of the things that happened when I did see a spirit channeler, and during one of my IC flare-ups. And she said, you must drop your mother's story. You must drop it like a load of rocks through a chute. And for me, it wasn't just dropping it, it was making meaning from it. And I guess that's what, if there's a definition that I have for narrative therapy, it's making meaning out of your story and maybe the story of your family members. And it doesn't have to be crafted. You don't have to be a writer in any public or professional sense. You don't have to publish. But if you can make meaning through both your own story and maybe going further back and as far back as you want to go or you can go, that can be really profound and really an avenue for healing.
Great to know. And I love somebody just said, we are not alone. It's just great.
So, talking about family,
Casey.
Diana, how are you breaking the trauma cycle with your two daughters?
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, I'm still living it. So
okay.
I hope that I am. I mean, to be honest, I never wanted to have girls. When I first got pregnant, it was kind of a surprise. And I just said, God, I hope it's boys. Like, I don't even know if I can, know how to raise girls. I knew that I gave my mom really a lot of hell when I was a teenager. And that was such
for you.
that was such a painful time of life for me. But here I am living it. My girls are 13 and 15. And let me tell you, they both been through trauma already. Some more intense than others. And, and I always try to, respect their privacy, but I feel like speaking it, naming it, witnessing it, and then offering them support around it, that is what it can do. Instead of burying it, instead of sweeping it under the rug, like things were in my family, instead of denial and avoidance. And I'm not perfect. And I know I can be a hard mom because I do have a strong personality. I'm outspoken and I'm in the public world as a writer. And, frankly, for a teen girl, that's not always where you want your mom to be. But they know I've got their back no matter what. They know they can come to me. And they know there's unconditional love. And I've talked to them about my mom's story, about their Nona. They know already. So there are no more secrets anymore.
Well, I think that's what's so important is that you're a truth teller. They're truth tellers, I'm sure. And there aren't secrets in the house. And I'm sad that they've gone through trauma, but I think that's the most important thing is that they can talk with you and about anything, and they don't have to be afraid to bring anything to you. Yeah, again, and then you understand.
Another great comment from Christy. Truth tellers often carry the weight and projections of the family system and trauma. I haven't met one yet that doesn't have very real chronic or hidden illnesses. Signed a therapist, truth teller. There you are.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love this.
I
We need
love
to write
that. Thank you, Christy.
I know.
I feel so seen by that. And yeah, and I am like I'm the oldest in my family. You know, my dad died very suddenly in 2005, the month before my first baby was born. And my mom is, you know, incapacitated. So there's actually a lot of dysfunction. There's estrangement in my family now. And I'm the one who's always still like naming it and saying, in speaking out. And that's not a comfortable place to be. Like you said,
Cynthia, I know, that's me. Yeah.
Right. Being the
really
one
hard,
to say the emperor has no clothes, but I just can't be any other way. Like that's kind of my birthright. And, you know, I mean, and I do, you know, I do love everyone in my family, but I'm not going to like participate in the dysfunction.
I perfectly said, I agree 100%. Yeah. And yes, perfect. I loved it. And what a great place to end. We would like to interview you for another, 10 hours, but I think Cameron would get upset. Again, everybody, here is the book. You don't have to be everything, and you don't.
Thank gosh.
By Diana Whitney, Poems for Girls Becoming Themselves. Please buy the book today. You'll learn so much. You guys are such a great audience.
A beautiful, beautiful book. I can't say enough about it. I'm going to say this again.
I'm going to give it away, and then I'm going to buy another one for me because I'm going to keep reading
from start to finish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I learned so much from it myself. A 6-year-old guy learned a tremendous amount from it. So
you're a teenage girl.
It's never too late to teach an old dog new tricks. For sure.
Thank you so much, Diana Whitney, for being such a wonderful guest. We have so many questions and comments.
I know, this is crazy.
We were just so selfish.
Amazing.
But we ran out of time. Yeah. So thank you for your really heroic work. And I learned so much from you. And I just bond. I just get you. And thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for being a guest on our show today. I send you so much love, Diana.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, John. And I send you back all the love. And thanks to everyone. You're such a wonderful audience. And I wish we could like have another hour to talk about all your questions. But I feel honored to be here and part of this community.
Part 2. Maybe we've got a part 2 coming. And I want to thank everybody in the audience for joining us on the trauma,
Tamara,
illness,
Lynn,
all these comments, trauma, illness paradigm.
I'm sorry. I was so distracted so often during the interview because there's so many great comments.
People, and they're smart. You guys and gals are smart. Thank you, John, for being my co-host.
Me?
Yes.
Well, yes. I just had to do nothing. I drank coffee. I had a great time. Okay.
And thank you to our wonderful producer at the Mighty, camera rolling. Thank you for keeping the camera rolling. Thank you for getting us to wrap. And and just a reminder, we are going to be gone for a couple of months. Not gone. We're going to be doing a conference, so we're not going to be here at the Mighty. Well, I actually think we might be here next month. So I lied.
We're kicking it.
That was a teaser.
Yeah, we may come back.
TK. Yeah. So, but we're going to be back soon, and then at the end of the year, we're going to be interviewing more incredible guests about trauma leading to illness. Such a critical, important topic. And until we see you next time, I just want to remind everybody that we got a pandemic going on.
There's still a pandemic going on. This thing called COVID.
So we have to be safe. So, we're vaccinated, so we can pod. We're podding.
Yeah.
So until we see you next, I know it's going to be really soon. Until then, be safe,
be well,
and be mighty. Woo!
Till next time.
Thank you. Till then.